Bonjour à tous, bonjour à toutes. Bienvenue pour cette masterclass exceptionnelle dédiée à John Higgins. Donc John Higgins est dessinateur de comics, scénariste. Il a notamment réalisé Batman, Judge Dredd ou Watchmen. Il a eu un prix Harvey pour du meilleur coloriste en 1988. Alors cette masterclass sera animée par David Fakrikian, qui est journaliste au magazine Première et Première Classique. Et vous avez créé notamment en 1999 DVD Vision, qui est le premier magazine au monde à offrir un DVD dans chaque numéro. Et vous avez écrit en 2017 James Cameron, l'Odyssée d'un cinéaste. Alors cette rentrée universitaire est placée sous le signe des comics, parce qu'il y a toute une programmation, des événements sur les comics, une exposition temporaire qui commence à partir de demain jusqu'au 29 novembre à l'ABU. Elle est visible du lundi au vendredi de 8h30 à 22h et le samedi de 9h30 à 17h. Excusez-moi, je suis essoufflé. Donc il y aura des conférences, il y aura un atelier de dessin, il y aura aussi une exposition d'art plastique et une projection d'un documentaire Marvel 14. Donc voilà, je crois que j'ai tout dit. Je vous laisse en compagnie de John et David. Bonne masterclass. Alors, excusez-moi. Merci. Juste pour info, donc, ça va s'organiser en trois temps. Premier temps, présentation du parcours de John Higgins. Deuxième temps, des démonstrations, ici. Et puis, dernier temps, échange avec vous. Profitez-en, il est là. Voilà.
Bonjour, merci. My name is John Higgins, as I've just been introduced as.
Moi, je suis David Fakrikian, donc je ferai un peu de traduction pour vous, pour ceux qui ne comprennent pas l'anglais. Et j'aiderai John tout au long de cette démonstration.
We're welcome to the world of Watchmen, as we see behind us. And Watchmen has achieved a certain status in comics and graphic novels.
On va commencer donc avec Watchmen. Watchmen qui est le dieu, je dirais, de tous les albums, des graphic novels. Go ahead, John.
And one of the things I was really pleased about, this came at the very beginning of my career. So I was very lucky to have something like this behind me before I started my whole career as a comic artist.
Donc John a fait Watchmen vraiment au début de sa carrière. It was already 10 years. You already had about 5-6 years in the business at the time.
Yes, but not comics. I was doing other stuff.
Il faisait donc de l'illustration à ses débuts. Il n'était pas encore rentré dans le comics. Et c'était important pour lui qu'il ait un projet aussi important, enfin aussi grand pour la suite.
So for me, Dave Gibbons, who I worked very closely with, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons were the creators of Watchmen, and I was allowed to be part of this incredible team. Dave had been working in the business probably about 5 years longer than I had.
Dave Gibbons avait commencé à travailler environ 5 ans avant John, et Dave a réellement pensé en fait tout ce qui est autour de Watchmen, donc du degré zéro jusqu'au top. Et il a pensé à tous les aspects graphiques du roman. Moi je dis c'est un roman graphique. Donc.
So for me it was a real roller coaster of a ride, creativity. Dave started thinking about Watchmen for a year before I even got onto the roller coaster ride.
Donc Dave a commencé à réfléchir à Watchmen, aux aspects donc, graphiques de l'album, du concept à environ 1 an avant que John arrive dessus.
And one of the things, because of his experience, he knew right from the very beginning the way he wanted to approach Watchmen. And I hope any of you new to the Watchmen today will learn some new stuff and take you to the book. Any of you who've been reading the Watchmen before, I will hopefully give you an insight into the sort of thinking behind it.
Voilà, donc on va espérer que ce qu'on va vous montrer là va vous donner un aperçu de la manière dont cet album, qui est assez unique, a été créé.
So the first page basically starts on the cover. Dave wanted to have a trompe-l'œil effect to introduce us, the reader, into the world of Watchmen. So the first page, which was the cover, was the first panel more or less. And then we come into the story proper.
Alors l'idée déjà qui frappe dès qu'on voit le premier numéro, c'est que la couverture n'est pas une couverture classique, c'est littéralement la première image de l'album. Et une fois qu'on l'ouvre, donc on continue à lire ce qu'on vient de voir, ce qui est rarement le cas, puisque les couvertures, comme vous le savez, sont comme des posters de films. Elles sont censées donner un aperçu de tout ce qu'il y a à l'intérieur, pas d'être la porte d'entrée.
Dave started out as a town planner before he became a comic artist. So when he does a pullback into the world of Watchmen, we get really clever perspective. And what Dave did right from the very beginning, because of his experience in comics, he used all the classic comic design elements. So we have silhouettes, close-ups, long shots, exactly as you would in a movie.
Donc Dave a pensé réellement, et c'est vraiment une des premières fois où ça arrivait dans le comic book, en utilisant les techniques du cinéma. Donc on avait des travelling, des zooms avant, enfin énormément de choses. Et ceci dit, donc dès le début, at the beginning, right there at the beginning, you can see a long shot tracking, long shot pulling up. Dès le début, donc on voit un plan qui monte et qui est absolument cinématographique. Ce qui fait que je vais rajouter une petite chose là, c'est qu'immédiatement, en voyant le premier numéro, des tas de cinéastes se sont dit il faut faire un film de ça, quoi. First time people saw the first pages. Yeah. Many filmmakers, I'm sure, thought we have to make a movie out of this.
Exactly. I mean, literally from the first year, 1986, there was talk about making a Watchmen movie because it's so cinematographic. But because of we didn't have CGI or the sort of digital techniques that we have now, so it would have been more or less impossible to do justice to the Watchmen. But Terry Gilliam was one of the first people who expressed an interest in doing the Watchmen movie.
Oui, immédiatement, très rapidement, à partir de 1987, je crois, Terry Gilliam s'est attaché à vouloir faire un film. À l'époque, on n'avait pas eu encore l'explosion des effets spéciaux en digital qui arrivait avec Terminator 2 et Jurassic Park, donc quasiment 5-6 ans après. Et donc Terry voulait faire un film qui était entièrement fait en dur. Et il a commencé à travailler donc, en s'inspirant de la bande dessinée.
So all the covers started in the same sort of way, which was basically a close-up of the first panel, and then there was a long pullback. One of the things that I enjoyed, because I came into the colouring aspect of it as a colour artist and as a painter, so to do the covers was really interesting for me. When we went internally and I started having to interpret the colours with the limitations of what we had in those days, which is the printing process, it was quite primitive compared to what we can do now.
Oui, alors à l'époque, il y avait des limitations sur la manière dont on faisait les couleurs, parce que John a fait les couleurs donc, sur la bande dessinée. On imprimait en 3 ou 4 couleurs. C'était un mélange, c'était pas du tout ce qu'on fait aujourd'hui, où on peut littéralement peindre les images une par une. Et l'idée de départ donc, qu'on a sur le premier plan est reprise à chacune des couvertures des 12 numéros.
One of the things I enjoyed about working with Dave was the way we collaborated. I went as a novice, a student, when I first started working with Dave. And Dave, we used to meet up in the studio because we lived quite close together. And one of the enjoyable things was like learning from Dave to see how he approached it as a master storyteller.
Alors, ils collaboraient ensemble parce qu'ils habitaient pas très loin l'un de l'autre. Et l'approche vraiment qu'il y a eu donc, donc c'est une très haute ambition. C'est de rendre quelque chose de vraiment unique dans le monde de la BD.
He had many design books from all around the world. This is obviously 10, 20 years before the World Wide Web. So Dave had to go out and source all this material. And the French had a great reputation, as you know, for design and comic strips. So Dave, there was a French bookstore in London, and Dave used to source books there. So we used to talk about design and all the elements. And the thing that I enjoyed, as I say, right from the beginning, was the design element of Watchmen.
Alors Dave s'est beaucoup inspiré des bandes dessinées européennes, donc la bande dessinée franco-belge. Il y en avait qu'il trouvait à Londres. Et donc il s'inspirait sur le design, sur le graphisme, la confection aussi de la bande dessinée, because the look, the way you talked about the paper, all this came into play, right? Est-ce que je dis le papier aussi a dû rentrer en ligne de compte pour le rendu, the paper of the cover, everything was thought out.
I mean, in some ways, if you know anything about comics or even movies now, it's like the smiley badge has become quite emblematic, especially with the splash of blood on it. I mean, that, to anyone who knows anything about comics, is Watchmen. And as I said at the first slide, Dave designed the whole aspect of Watchmen so it would be immediately recognizable. And even when Watchmen started pulling in close, like this slide is, you still know it's Watchmen because of the bright yellow, the splash of blood, and the black eye.
Oui, il y avait aussi un choix de couleurs qui était très important et assez unique, avec donc le contraste entre le jaune qu'on voit ici et le rouge du sang, qui a donné vraiment comme une trademark, comme une marque de fabrique de Watchmen. Et aujourd'hui encore, donc, quand on voit even the font of the logo, même quand on voit le font utilisé pour le logo, parfois c'est réutilisé par d'autres personnes dans des génériques de films, des bandes annonces, etc. Et ça nous fait penser Watchmen immédiatement.
And even when you go even closer, it's still the yellow, Watchmen, the blood, red, and then the black eye. Now, I'm assuming most of you are students, so you're here to learn, so I'm actually going to ask you some questions now.
Sorry,
I'm going to ask them some questions about imagery.
Oh yeah, alors même donc quand on zoome sur l'image, la trademark Watchmen est encore là. Donc si vous avez quelques questions sur l'imagerie, John va y répondre tout de suite.
You ready? Does anyone know what this one is?
Est-ce que quelqu'un sait ce que représente ce logo?
Superman.
Superman.
You have to recognize this one. Asterix. Batman. Mickey Mouse. That's the incredible thing about iconic imagery. And I think, for myself personally, I think The Watchmen has achieved that, particularly with the movie. The movie is an interesting aspect of comics production. It's one of those sort of like, it's the goose that lays the golden egg if you're involved in this sort of classic comic, should we say.
Oui, alors c'est très important donc de trouver une imagerie qui est assez iconique et qui est instantanément reconnaissable, particulièrement donc quand ça donne l'idée sur un film ou sur un comics dans ce cas-là, voilà quoi.
The thing that I find interesting about working on The Watchmen, when it became a massive success, 86, 87, 89, it sold over 25 years, something like 250,000 copies.
Okay, sur les 25 premières années, il s'est vendu 250 000 exemplaires, donc of the graphic novel or the comic books.
Graphic novel.
Donc de l'album relié, puisque Watchmen est sorti d'abord en 12 fascicules séparés, et sur environ une période d'un an et demi. It was a bit late, I remember. We waited a bit for the last issue, so it was more than a year for the 12, the original 12 issues. Et on est vraiment, en fait, le fait que toute cette imagerie autour soit complètement cohérente a beaucoup participé au succès de la bande dessinée, en plus de tout le reste.
And when the movie came out in 2009, within 2 months, it sold over 1 million copies.
Donc quand le film est sorti en 2009, en l'espace de 2 mois, 1 million d'exemplaires ont été vendus, donc de la nouvelle version reliée.
And that is the power of movies. And as a creator, one of the things that obviously, once it becomes a movie, it becomes a completely different animal, as David knows, being a director as he is.
Oui, c'est la force des films, c'est-à-dire que même si une bande dessinée est confidentielle, ce qui n'était pas le cas de Watchmen, l'existence d'un film fait monter dans l'esprit des gens, dans le radar, si vous voulez, du grand public, l'existence d'une bande dessinée, ce qui fait que beaucoup plus de gens s'y intéressent que le noyau original, quoi, des fans.
Before I started working on Watchmen, I was a comics fan. I'm still a comics fan now. I still buy comics regularly on a monthly basis. I love buying that monthly book. I love graphic novels because obviously I've been involved with one of the biggest selling graphic novels of the history of comics.
Oui, Dave était comme nous tous, il était fan avant de rentrer dans le métier.
And the sort of books I read when I was at college was the underground American comics, and Metal Holland was something that I'll come to in a little while. That was a mainstream comic, but the undergrounds for me was my education.
Oui, donc il y avait des comics comme des comics européens aussi qui l'intéressaient, comme Metal Hurlant, et des comics underground.
And I think I'm not showing. I should show you these actually, so you can keep up with them. But
Yeah.
if you can see that.
Yeah.
So these are my comic collection. I still have these in my studio now, and I still reference them regularly.
Donc c'est sa collection de comics.
And you can
Il la prend en
see.
photo.
You can see the sort of subject matter that's appealed to me, which is like grim wit, skull. Cannibal Funnies was one of my favorites as well.
They're all kind of rare comic books.
Yes.
Donc c'est tous ces comics qui l'ont influencé. And those were British comics?
American.
Ok, c'est des comics américains.
Yeah, and I said one of them, I'm going to try a bilingual joke now, so hopefully David can manage to do that. So Cannibal Funnies was my favorite underground comic.
Which one?
Cannibal Funnies.
Cannibal Funnies, d'accord. C'était son comics underground favori.
Right, this is the joke. Two cannibals were sitting there eating a clown.
What? Ok. So, c'est l'histoire de deux cannibales qui sont à la recherche d'un clown.
Two cannibals eating a clown.
I don't get it.
I haven't finished the joke yet.
Oh,
Two
yeah.
cannibals
Yeah.
eating a clown.
Yeah, okay.
And then I'll give you the joke.
Okay, give it to me.
Tell the group.
Yeah.
Okay, two cannibals eating a clown. One looks at the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?" See? They got it. Right, that was a good attempt, I think. Thank you very much for being generous with us. Richard Corbin and Metal Holland. Two of my favourite influences was John Giraud and Richard Corbin.
Ok, c'est Eerie et Metal Hurlant, qui sont deux de ses favoris. Metal Hurlant, bien sûr, qui a longtemps existé en France.
Really influenced me.
Et Metal Hurlant, je fais une parenthèse, qui a été traduit, qui a eu un tel succès sur toute l'Europe qu'il a été traduit à l'international. It was heavy metal in USA.
Yep.
A while later.
And all the stuff I did before I became a comic artist was book covers. I worked on underground comics from my influences. But book covers were a really good thing that I enjoyed. Science fiction for me and horror is the thing that I still find exciting to do now because it's sheer fantasy. Like science fiction is future horror. You know, hopefully we'll never have to deal with horror, but I like to depict it. I'm one of the biggest cowards in the world, but I like depicting horror. I like giving you nightmares, basically.
Donc il adorait faire des couvertures de livres d'horreur, science-fiction, fantasy, etc. Ça, c'était à ses débuts. Donc.
And science fiction, as I say, one of the things I really enjoy about trying to make things look real, you know, from nothing from my imagination, that's the thing that I enjoy most in what I do for a living.
Ce qu'il aimait, c'est l'hyper-réalité, donc même dans la science-fiction, rendre les éléments réels.
Dave Gibbons recognized my coloring skills because when I first started working in comics, which is around 85, 86, I was coloring other artists' work. This is work by Steve Dillon, the co-creator of Preacher.
Okay, donc quand Dave commençait, what were you doing with Dave when you?
Well, I was coloring other
Oh
artists.
yeah, you started coloring other artists before you did on Watchmen. Donc il a commencé à colorier avec d'autres artistes avant d'arriver dessus.
That's right, and so like the great thing about sort of like working in this industry is the fact that how you are discovered is by expressing yourself. So like networking is a very important part of what all of us are going to do when you leave college. Networking.
Okay, ce qui est important, c'est le réseau en fait à creuser. Donc quand on est un jeune artiste qui débute.
As I say, 86 was one of my favorite years because that's when I started working full time in comics. So I was starting to do my own comic work. I was working on 2000 AD, and this is one of the first books covers that I did for a comic. That's 1986 as well. And it was great fun to actually do this and Watchmen. So I'd actually, 1986 is the year I felt I'd arrived as a comic artist making a living.
Okay, c'est à partir de vraiment 1986 qu'il a commencé à travailler dans les comics. Donc il y a cette couverture-là de 2000 AD qui est un des premiers travaux qu'il a fait. It was one of the first work you did, only the cover in 2080.
I started doing interior stories as well. This is The Exploding Man, which was great fun to do. It was written by...
Il faisait aussi des histoires à l'intérieur. Donc,
it was written by John Wagner and Alan Grant, who are the two predominant Judge Dredd artists.
Oui, c'est histoire écrite par John Wagner et Alan Grant, qui étaient des grands scénaristes de 2000 AD, qui faisaient Judge Dredd, entre autres.
Now back to Watchmen. This is an incredibly recognizable character. Everyone's favorite psychopath, basically.
C'est un personnage que vous reconnaissez, je pense, pas besoin de présentation.
And when I first started the coloring on Watchmen, the one on the left is the way I would color it if we were doing the coloring in 2018.
Alors la version que vous avez là à gauche est celle à quoi ça ressemblerait s'il avait été colorié pour 2000 AD.
And the one on the right is the way the coloring was done in 1986. Before computers, it was all small dot, a very limited palette.
Et celui donc à droite est celui tel qu'il apparaissait dans le comics, donc à l'époque en 1986, qui était entièrement colorié point par point. Donc vous voyez les couleurs, on voit bien là, le piqué, ce qui était reproduit parfois dans les comics quand ils étaient traduits en France, et parfois pas du tout. Et il y avait un énorme débat à cette époque avec les fans de comics sur est-ce que les points faisaient le style du comics ou pas. There was a strong debate at the time from fans because some of the reprints in France they were like 2080 and the others were like with points. Yeah. People were saying the point maybe is more authentic to what comic books are really.
I know, it was very strange because Dave loved traditional American-style comic printing, which is a very limited palette. I found it very frustrating.
Donc Dave, c'est intéressant, c'est que Dave aimait la manière basique donc d'imprimer les comics, la manière primitive.
This is the very first page I did as an example to the editor at that time, who was Len Wayne. And Len Wayne was the editor at that particular time. I think they had two editors on Watchmen.
C'est la première page que Dave a coloriée pour l'éditeur Len Wayne, qui était un des deux éditeurs qui a travaillé sur la série Watchmen.
And for me, it basically started a connection, obviously, with Watchmen, which goes all the way to today. I'm still working on Watchmen-related stuff, which is wonderful and weird. And in our business as freelance comic artists, to actually have that longevity on one particular title, I still find it's mind-blowing.
C'est assez intéressant donc de pouvoir travailler à l'avance de cette manière, avec une certaine liberté qu'on n'avait pas à l'époque. Quand on était freelance artiste, donc quand on travaillait, you were working from the UK, sending it to the publisher in US.
FedEx, the old-fashioned way.
C'est ça, à travers le monde, en utilisant FedEx.
And this is a title I worked on with Len Wayne, who's also mainly a writer rather than an editor. It's one of those strange things about writers. Artists, to a certain extent, can swap and change horses, career horses. Writers can be editors or writers. You know, there's this if you want to work in comics, it's a limited sort of career path, shall we say.
Oui, en fait, les gens, c'est assez éclectique dans le comics, c'est-à-dire que l'éditeur, c'est la personne qui est en charge de superviser la confection du scénario, des dessins, s'assurer que tout rentre dans les canons. Et il s'avérait que parfois les éditeurs pouvaient être scénaristes, mais parfois les artistes aussi pouvaient être scénaristes. Les choses n'étaient pas compartimentées.
So I actually got the pleasure of working with Len Wayne 25 years later, after he gave me the best job of my career, basically. And this is a series called Crimson Corsair. It was one particular part of an ongoing series which was before Watchmen, which was a bit controversial when it first started, and I know a lot of fans thought it was the wrong thing to do with Watchmen. It should not be changed in any way. And before Watchmen didn't change things, it's like it stuck to a certain approach that Alan and Dave has already set up. What they're doing now, which I think we spoke about earlier maybe, it's like they're introducing Watchmen into the riding DC universe, and that's really big and controversial. And on the right-hand side, we have Batman holding the smiley badge, which is quite controversial, should we say.
Yeah. Oui, 25 ans après, donc DC a décidé d'introduire le Watchmen dans l'univers DC. Et il y a eu plusieurs nouvelles séries, et donc comme vous le savez. Et John a fait Crimson Corsair, donc qui a été commencé. Len Wein started writing it at the beginning, and then you took over, right?
That's
The
right,
scripting.
yeah.
Donc c'est Len Wein qui était l'éditeur du Watchmen original qui a commencé à écrire le strip, et ensuite John a repris les choses. Donc John dessinait bien évidemment. Et c'est assez intéressant parce que l'aspect, donc le comic book pirate qui était à l'intérieur de Watchmen a toujours aussi eu un peu, c'est-à-dire que les gens s'interrogeaient, est-ce que So I'm just adding some stuff there. So les gens s'intéressaient de savoir si la BD pourrait mieux fonctionner s'il n'y avait pas le comic book de pirate dedans. Mais en fait, Watchmen a été pensé de A à Z sur tous les aspects. Et évidemment, le comic de pirate qui est dans la BD originale en fait partie complètement. D'ailleurs, c'est pour ça que sur le film, comme vous le savez, ils ont fait une version qui incorpore une version extra longue qui incorpore le dessin animé, évidemment. Et donc, il y a eu cette chance, en fait, que moi-même j'ai trouvé assez intéressante, puisqu'on s'était déjà rencontré à ce moment-là avec John, et John pouvait donc travailler dans un contexte historique. So you had the luck to start walking into a historical period context, drawing a full comics. Et ce comics apparaissait donc enfin, it appeared at the end of the new Watchmen comics. Il apparaissait en fin des nouveaux comics Watchmen.
It was a great thing to do. I was always slightly surprised they actually didn't do Tales of the Black Freighter. I personally would have liked to have done Tales of the Black Freighter, but for some reason, something to do with copyright reasons, so it was called Curse of the Crimson Corsair, which sounds a bit hokey to me. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just like, it's such a comics Watchmen fan. This like Tales of the Black Freighter sounds really chilling and quite modern, even now.
So what kind of test didn't you do? The test that you didn't have to do?
Well, I wanted it to be Tales of the Black Freighter, but because I don't know why, in some ways they wanted to be like a pirate story, just because Tales of the Black Freighter was a pirate story. The problem is, Tales of the Black Freighter actually had a reason to be there. To ask me to do a pirate story was slightly absurd, but I wasn't going to complain because I got paid very, very well for it.
Okay, la série avait une raison d'être là, donc la série de comics. Do you think that Tales could work on its own when you take it out, or?
Yeah, I mean, that for me was the most satisfying thing, was the fact that it was made into a collector's edition at the end of the run. I think it stands as something that I'm very proud of. My partner actually is now my colorist, and she's sitting at the back with her head in the book, or either fallen asleep, I'm not totally sure. But Sally Jane Hurst is now my colorist, and she was coloring Tales of the Black Freighter, and Curse of the Crimson Corsair. And it was really nice to see it come together. And one of the problems I had was the fact that, like, because it was only 2 pages in 6 individual storylines, it was almost irrelevant. And a lot of people said so on the internet.
Oui, alors depuis, donc quand il a fait la nouvelle série Crimson Corsair, John a pu collaborer avec sa partenaire actuelle, Sally, qui est assise là dans le public derrière vous, qui est sa coloriste aujourd'hui, parce que les couleurs donc ne sont pas de John. Et ce qui était un peu difficile en faisant Crimson Corsair, c'est de rendre les 2 pages, que ces 2 pages aient un rapport. Ce qui est par exemple dans le cas de Watchmen, à chaque fois qu'on voit le comic book de pirate, ça a un rapport avec l'histoire. Donc avec toute la bande dessinée qui est pas toute l'histoire racontée dans l'épisode autour. Cette fois-ci, non, c'était pas le cas. It wasn't the case when you had the 2 pages at the end of the story. They didn't really relate to the story.
No, and it should have, but it was impossible to do so. I think the problem is, I mean, I think I've probably said before, but I think the artists raised the game and actually did an incredible job, all the different artists. I don't think some of the writers achieved a Watchmen-esque type of story. Darwin Cook was the only writer I felt who actually got quite a very close Watchmen-esque story. So the Minutemen and Silk Spectre that he did with Amanda Connor, I think, are the most Watchmen-esque before Watchmen stories.
Okay, that's complicated.
Darwin Cook was the best Watchmen subsequent to Alan writer, basically, for me.
Yeah, do you want to go further with the art?
Well, I haven't got back there. I'll just talk about the colouring now. I'm going back to the colouring.
Sure.
Yep.
Donc il va vous parler de la couleur. Donc.
Right, what we have here, this nowadays anyone on a computer can colour a million different ways. You know, you have millions of colours. This is what I had to work with in 1986.
Donc aujourd'hui, évidemment, on a tout un panel de couleurs sur ordinateur et voilà comment il travaillait en 1986. Donc c'est juste cette sélection de couleurs. It was a selection of colors and you could blend some of them. So il pouvait en mélanger certaines pour obtenir de nouvelles couleurs.
Yeah, these were just the printers, what the printers could cope with in the traditional 4-color printing in 1986.
C'était la manière de travailler à l'époque. So you were like literally did you draw by hand and then put in the codes, or did you just put in the codes without
Nope.
looking? Est-ce qu'il mettait les codes? Je lui demande parce que vous voyez, il y avait des codes Y3, B3, etc. Donc est-ce qu'il prenait une page en noir et blanc et dans laquelle il mettait, il voyait dans sa tête toutes les couleurs avec les codes, ou est-ce qu'il coloriait avant pour savoir?
Yep, so this is the markup that we do. I mean, we photocopied each page, and then the 28 story pages I had to colour up by hand with watercolour on that restricted palette, and then we do a markup. So we had to indicate every single colour on this page for the hand separators.
Oui, c'était un cauchemar. Donc il fallait indiquer chacune des couleurs dans la page, il fallait dessiner certaines pages à la main pour savoir ensuite quelles couleurs allaient aller dedans, et annoter. Donc comme vous pouvez le voir sur les côtés, il y a toute une série d'annotations sur les bonnes couleurs qui doivent aller à l'intérieur. Did you have some surprise Est-ce que quand le comics était imprimé, vous avez des surprises?
Yeah, we did have a lot of surprise, and funnily enough, I'm actually going to touch on that in a minute. The great thing about working on Watchmen, because of the limitations, I actually managed to discover something relatively new in the context of American comics.
Ce qui était intéressant dans Watchmen, c'est que c'est de découvrir quelque chose de faire quelque chose de nouveau dans le contexte des comics.
American comics have never been as sophisticated in one way as European comics.
Les comics américains donc n'avaient pas encore le niveau de sophistication des comics, des bandes dessinées françaises. On disait bandes dessinées en France.
And Watchmen changed that, not only with the storytelling, but also with the way I used the colours. And the only reason I discovered this method of colouring was because of the limitations of the printing. So I actually used the colour to engender emotion, which is something that had not been done in American comics as far as I know at that particular stage.
Oui, et Watchmen donc a changé tout ça. C'était une période vraiment spéciale. Et la manière d'utiliser les couleurs, donc un peu comme on le voyait dans les graphic novels français, pour créer de l'émotion, c'est ce que John a essayé de faire.
So bright red, as we know, is danger, and that obviously was the murder scene with the comedian, and that because of the sophistication of the storytelling, and it was flashing backwards and forwards, I had to keep that colour scheme going throughout, and that created a lot of colour conundrums, shall we say. But I had to stick to this colour theory, which was using colour to create a sense of emotion as much as anything. So even before you read the story, you would actually get a sense of obviously what was on the page.
You wanted to create a sense of motion and emotion, I guess.
Yeah.
Donc l'idée était vraiment, je vais résumer, de créer à la fois un sens de mouvement et un sens d'émotion à travers l'usage des couleurs.
And as you can see on these pages, the red really comes out. It's like it shouts in your face, basically, which is what was happening. Obviously, violence is something that's not subtle and downplayed. and the bottom right-hand panel where Rorschach is walking away from the close-up of the blood red roses into the cool distance, you can see the optical effect you can get with color.
Oui, alors il y a tout un sens de contraste utilisé dans la manière dont les couleurs sont disposées depuis de haut jusqu'en bas des images, enfin de la page.
I suppose it took me a while to get used to working with this form of storytelling, because Dave and Alan, as I said, have been doing it for about 5 years, certainly Dave had. He knew the intricacies of storytelling and how to get involved in the story. I was still learning that. But by the time I got to Rorschach's episode in Watchmen, the chapter that dealt with Rorschach's horrific upbringing, I was completely in tune with what I was trying to do with Watchmen.
Alors Dave avait un peu d'avance sur la manière dont faire passer les choses sur John, et il a dû attendre d'arriver à l'épisode Rorschach vraiment pour être, de son avis, à la hauteur sur l'utilisation des couleurs.
So what I was trying to do in the Rorschach story, I hope I'm not giving any spoilers away here. If you've read it, then that's fine. If you're about to read it, well, I'm sorry. Close your ears, put your fingers in them. Do you want to say that?
No, keep going.
I started off the Rorschach chapter bright and cheerful when the psychiatrist was talking to Rorschach, and then towards the end of this particular episode, it goes darker and darker and darker. So the colours go from starting off bright and cheerful, warm yellows, oranges, and so on. And then throughout the story, there is a progression where the whole story gets darker and darker and darker. And then this is the last page.
Oui, alors si on le voit sur cet épisode-là, les couleurs commencent de manière assez fluo, violente, et deviennent de plus en plus sombres au fur et à mesure. Donc c'est toute une évolution sur les 22, ou je ne sais plus combien de pages il y a dans cet épisode, toute une évolution qui est vraiment pensée au niveau des couleurs aussi.
One of the things we talked about just a little bit earlier was the way things have changed with reproduction. And when we got the opportunity to do the Absolute Edition, where I got the opportunity to digitally colour the Watchmen all the way through, we did a couple of things that we got caught with. So some of the colouring aspects, when I first worked on Watchmen, we only discovered after they'd been printed, because working on something by hand and then seeing it reproduced in those days was almost a very hit and miss part of production.
Alors, John a eu l'occasion quelques années après. When was the time when you did the new colors? In 2009?
2005.
Okay, donc il a eu l'occasion de revoir toutes les couleurs et de les faire de manière moderne. Donc il a dû approcher ça. So you approach it with a way to be close to what it originally was, but get beyond the limitation of the printing, I guess. So l'idée était de vraiment respecter les couleurs d'origine, tout en outrepassant, puisqu'on peut se le permettre maintenant avec le digital, les limitations de l'impression à l'époque en 4 couleurs.
These 2 pages, the first page in the story of Watchmen. And on the left is the proof. We had an opportunity to use grey, which we discovered once I was colouring issue 3, that it was a mistake. So on the left here.
Donc on a 2 comparaisons ici. Donc sur la gauche, on the left is the original proof.
Yep.
Donc c'est la version telle qu'elle était censée être imprimée à l'origine. Et à droite, donc c'est on the right
the
was
absolute.
the way it came out. Oh, the absolute.
Yeah.
Ok. Et à droite, donc il y a la version remise au goût du jour. Donc où on voit par exemple que l'usage des gris, because the red, for example, on the original is very tame, a bit
not
gray.
too much.
Et on voit que les couleurs peuvent. C'est un peu comme une remasterisation. It's a bit like a remaster of a film. In digital, c'est qu'on peut faire sortir des couleurs qui étaient tout le temps là, mais que la technologie ne permettait pas de montrer.
So we managed to change all these things when we did the Absolute Edition in 2005. So one of my problems for more or less 25 years, I lived with all those mistakes, and every time someone came up to me and said, "You must be so proud of the Watchmen," I go, no, not really, no.
Oui, pendant 25 ans, mais ça c'est le problème hein, quand on crée une œuvre, il était face à toutes les erreurs qui étaient imprimées. Donc à chaque fois que quelqu'un voulait lui faire signer la bande dessinée et qu'il jetait un œil dedans, ça le faisait grommeler.
But now I am.
Maintenant ça va mieux.
This, for me, if you have the original edition of Watchmen, and if you looked closely, one of the things, again, we talked about earlier in this talk was, if you look at the one on the... Yes, the one on the left was printed with the dots, very crude printing, as we spoke about.
Ok, la version à droite donc était l'impression très crue.
And the one on the right was the digital one, 2005.
Et la version donc à droite est celle remise au goût du jour.
And one of the lovely things, if you do look at this very, very closely, what DC gave us was the best production values they had at the time. And because every single colour had a dead end, it stopped. So 25% stopped dead, and then 50% went past that. So it's like 50%, 25%, but it stopped with a line. When we were doing
il y avait
this
des limitations donc d'impression de l'encre, c'est-à-dire qu'au bout de 25%, les choses s'arrêtaient, ce qui n'était plus le cas une fois qu'on passe à la technologie actuelle.
Yeah, we got the best separators, the people who worked on it, and they actually used their fingerprints to break the edge of this particular panel.
Okay, like they use their fingers.
So you could actually see fingerprints in the original printing, which really impressed me greatly. So when I did the Absolute Edition, I made a digital thumbprint brush of my thumb. And I did the same thing on the 2005 edition, just because I was so proud of the original faceless, separators.
Okay, donc il a réutilisé, donc sur l'original, les gens avaient utilisé leur pouce pour étaler les couleurs, et il a fait de même de manière virtuelle, donc pour rester dans le même esprit sur la version absolute. Yep. La version absolute qui est la version remasterisée.
So that's my thumbprint there. So if you want to frame me for murder, this is where you get my thumbprint from.
Donc c'est lui qui est recherché pour meurtre.
This is one of my favorite pages. Dave Gibbons gave me this when we worked on the original Watchmen, and what I liked about it at the time was the storytelling page is very, very quiet.
Donc c'est une des pages originales que dont Dave lui a fait cadeau. Dave gave it to you. Yeah. Et ce qu'il aime beaucoup, c'est que tout est très calme dans cette page.
And the coloring on this, I wanted to be very muted. It was after Dan Dreiberg had a relationship with Sally Upetus, and it's very quiet and meditative, and I wanted the colours. Yeah. So I wanted the colours to reflect his mind, which is calm and relaxed. And
donc il voulait refléter vraiment quelque chose de très calme, de l'introspection. Il y a un sentiment de tranquillité sur cette page.
And this is the Absolute Edition proof of, this is a proof of the Absolute Edition. So the subtlety of colour, we've actually finally managed to catch the way I'd originally intended it to be. Only took 22 years.
Great.
This almost is a colour exercise. One of the problems we had when we did the original colouring was because I had to use the same colours from scene to scene to scene, depending on what colour is around them, will make that colour react in a different way. It's an optical illusion.
Okay, so it's complicated. so alors il utilisait donc you have to use different colors. The way so go ahead. Explain.
So these are the colours that the sugar cube first appeared on. So these colours here, and then when Rorschach and Dan Dreiberg, Night Owl, goes to Ozymandias' Fortune of Solitude, basically in Antarctic, it goes from very striking hot colours from, a modern kitchen. Then it goes into the cold colours of the Antarctic.
Okay.
And the colours change. So how can I make that work as a colour artist? That's the problem I had.
Ok, il avait un très gros problème donc pour switcher des couleurs très vives aux couleurs de l'Antarctique, which was very, very cold. I guess. Alors on passe donc, c'est un vrai contraste. Donc,
yeah, and this is just a colour exercise. Basically, it shows you how the same green colour of the sugar wrapper will change depending on what colour is surrounding it. So surrounded by yellow gives it a different effect, and surrounded by blue gives it a different effect, and so on. So this is almost like just a colour optical illusion.
Yeah, c'est une illusion d'optique. Right?
Yeah, so we use the same colours. We haven't changed the colour of the sugar cube, but the colours behind it gives the same colour a different effect.
Donc l'idée est que les couleurs ne changent pas, mais c'est la couleur de dessous qui fait changer la couleur à chaque fois en fait.
It really is almost
je suis désolé, mais j'entends pas très bien avec les retours. Je crois que vous entendez mieux que moi ce qu'il raconte, et parfois j'ai du mal. Sometimes I don't get it because of the feedback.
Yeah. This is I was allowed to use the Watchmen characters, and I did a set of colour prints that I'll have on display over the next couple of days. And this is the sort of colouring I thought if we ever redid the Watchmen, this is the sort of modern colouring I would have used. And luckily Dave said no.
Donc ça c'est plutôt les couleurs. Donc s'il avait la liberté aujourd'hui de travailler Watchmen, c'est le type de couleur qu'il utiliserait.
Dave was really happy with the original colouring. He felt it was specifically Watchmen colouring.
Donc Dave était très content des couleurs originales, et il pense que c'est l'identité des couleurs de Watchmen.
And in a way, I'm really pleased that he said that, because to actually recolour it in the modern way to a certain extent would have not devalued this story, because the story is just a brilliant story anyway. My colouring is just one little part of it. But it would have made it would not have stood out to a certain extent visually. So Dave making that editorial decision was very, very important, and I think it was a very good decision.
Yeah. Do you think you will go for a darker? Est-ce que vous ferez quelque chose qui est beaucoup plus noir maintenant, if Watchmen was made like 5 years before, like today? Do you think the colors would have been much more darker? Because there was il y avait une très grande identité, je dirais très flashy dans le choix des. It was very flashy the way it was very striking.
Very striking, yeah. And that's because of the limitations. If I'd have been colouring it today, it would not have necessarily stood out in a colour sense. It would look good, I hope. But the thing is, what I had to do with the colour in 1986 just would not be done now. The colour theory behind what I did in 1986 would not have been relevant in 2018.
Et c'était dû, donc ce choix de couleurs très violentes était dû aux limitations à l'époque de l'impression. Et si aujourd'hui il pouvait le faire, évidemment le choix artistique ne serait pas le même. But sometimes I'm guessing that the limitations, so you have to work with the limitations that give the identity of the art. Et quelquefois donc les limitations vous poussent à faire quelque chose que vous ne vouliez pas faire au départ, mais qui crée une identité unique.
The great thing for us very early on, we found, like even in 1986, the appreciation for Watchmen was worldwide, and this is a collection of Zenda, a French publication that collected it.
Donc à partir de 1987, les rééditions de Watchmen ont commencé à se répandre partout. Celle-ci, c'est l'édition de Zenda, avec donc des nouvelles couvertures qu'avait fait Dave Gibbons. And you did the colors for this. Il a fait les couleurs aussi pour ces couvertures-là. Ce qui est intéressant, c'est que Watchmen had started to be published in France in small format, but suddenly it stopped and it was the Zenda, the prestige version. Watchmen avait commencé à sortir en quelques épisodes chez Reddit. Ça s'est arrêté immédiatement et c'est sorti dans une édition à la hauteur, donc immédiatement, qui était en grand format. And were you a bit because the format was much taller? So, do you think it was a different way? Parce que les comics, même s'ils sont dessinés sur des grandes planches, sont censés être réduits et lus, et donc tous les choix de cadrage, etc., sont faits par rapport à la taille d'un comics habituel. Et donc, qu'est-ce que tu penses what do you think of the way it hold up in a larger format?
I think the French showed the Americans how to do it, basically. I think it was just brilliant what Zenda did. They did a large format and they did these wonderful different covers, allowed us to do these sort of covers. So I think the French really showed the Americans how to do good production values.
Ouais, donc ils pensent que forcément ça donnait une autre tenue et beaucoup plus impressionnante à la bande dessinée.
And the Absolute Edition, that's now a larger format, basically the same size, I think, probably as Zenda.
Et la version absolue, donc avec les couleurs refaites, qui est à peu près le même format, est en gros équivalente à la version donc, qui a été faite par Zenda, qui était un peu le pionnier finalement, si on veut. It was a bit pioneer of the way Watchmen would stay in the public consciousness, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. This is, you might recognize this. This is another thing that I'm quite well known for, is coloring the Batman, The Killing Joke. And that
Là, c'est ces couleurs pour Batman, The Killing Joke.
And that has been recolored in a modern way by Brian Bolland, the original artist. And one of the things that a couple of people did say was the fact that, like, why make something modern out of something that was relevant in 89?
Oui. Ce qui est intéressant, donc, c'est que Brian Bolland, le dessinateur, est revenu presque 20 ans après. Or 25 years later, or it was, or maybe 30 years later. It's so old now. Et il a fait une version moderne. Et les gens ont demandé, mais pourquoi changer les couleurs moi, personnellement, je trouve ça très intéressant. Je trouve qu'elles se complémentent. I think it's interesting. They both complement each other. It's different visions of the story.
Yep. Well, I think that, for me, was one of the most interesting things. When I actually walked into a bookstore and saw The Killing Joke without my name on it, I thought, a bit cheeky. But then I found out I actually didn't colour it, and it was Brian Bolland coloured it. And it was basically a desaturated version of my colouring. And what we end up getting was exactly what Dave was saying. I did it from the perspective of the madness of the Joker, whereas I didn't find out until later, but like Brian wants to be from this dark perspective of Batman.
Oui, alors why did you find it was cheeky that your name was on the cover of The Killing Joke? Because usually the colorist doesn't have his name on.
Well, they found, because of the success of Watchmen, and once you're associated with that type of success, they want to use the same creative group. And my name carried a certain cachet.
I get it, yeah. Alors, en fait, son nom est sur la pochette de la version originale de The Killing Joke, parce que suite au succès de Watchmen, l'éditeur pensait qu'associer les noms ensemble pouvait aider commercialement la chose. La manière dont il a, donc I'm going back to what you were saying, la manière dont il a abordé les couleurs de Batman The Killing Joke, c'est vraiment à travers les yeux du Joker de montrer la folie du personnage, ce qui est très différent de la manière dont Brian Bolland a je dirais, retiré énormément de ses couleurs pour en faire un point de vue, je dirais, plus esthétique. It was more designer, his colors, the Brian colors were way more designer. It was more of a director's perspective, I would say. Je dirais c'est plus de la perspective d'un réalisateur qui veut imprimer des couleurs plutôt que de celle de quelqu'un qui se met à la place d'un personnage.
And I have no problem with Brian doing his coloring, except my name was now taken off Batman The Killing Joke.
Alors, son nom n'a pas été enlevé dessus, même si c'est Brian qui a fait la couleur de la réédition. And did you get, you don't have to answer this, but did you get some royalty for the new version, or because your name is still on it? Est-ce qu'il touche, je demande, c'est indiscret, est-ce qu'il touche des royalties sur cette nouvelle version?
Well, that was the thing. When I was employed in 1986, they didn't have royalties for colorists.
Alors, à l'époque, il n'y avait pas de royalties quand on faisait les couleurs en 1987, quand est sorti l'album original.
So the only satisfaction for me on Batman, The Killing Joke, was to have my name on the cover, so they took that away from me.
Ok, donc la chose qu'il a le plus gagné, c'est d'avoir son nom dessus, ce qui est pas mal. It's very good nonetheless.
Yes. But the strange and interesting thing is they got in touch. One of the things that upset me about the recoloring was the fact that no one told me. I only discovered it when I went into a bookstore, and that's ill-mannered, to say the least. But subsequent to that, they got in touch with me earlier on, or later last year, and they are doing an absolute edition of The Killing Joke, and they're going to have both colouring in it, so they have Brian Bolland's and mine. So I think that's quite interesting, and I should get some royalties from that.
Okay, so it's coming out soon? Or?
Yeah, at the end of this year.
Okay, donc à la fin de l'année, ils vont faire une version absolute de Batman de Killing Joke qui aura les deux. So he's going to have the story twice.
Yep.
Donc l'histoire va être imprimée à l'intérieur 2 fois avec les couleurs originales et les couleurs de Brian Bolland. Et là-dessus, là, il aura quelque chose.
And I think that's a little bit cheeky, really, but, so what?
Ouais.
Say le gars. Now we're going on to one of my favourite aspects of Watchmen was when the movie came out in 2009.
Donc quand le film Watchmen est sorti en 2009,
What Dave did in 1986 was he approached the whole thing from the design aspect to promoting it. And this was a series of black and white illustrations he did in 1986 just to give a taster to the audience.
oui, donc en 1986, il y a eu une série de posters. They were like adverts in magazines. Donc c'était des publicités dans les magazines de comics qui étaient en noir et blanc because I think it was Amazing Heroes or maybe the Comics Journal. So they were all in black and white.
Yeah.
Donc il y a eu donc cette série d'images qui ont été utilisées. Donc il y avait le logo Watchmen sur le côté. There was the logo and there was some quotes. If I remember right. Il y avait donc des citations juste à côté. Là, on ne voit que les images. Et elles étaient en noir et blanc. So you never got to color them back then.
Not then.
Right. Donc il n'avait jamais eu l'occasion de les colorier à cette époque-là, à ce moment-là. Et il a pu le faire en 2009 quand le film est sorti, because they used it for the film.
That's right. And that was a great thing. So, like, one of the most satisfying things I found about the movie was it's almost like my career came full circle. When I was doing everything in 1986, I was learning as I went along, and it was very, very, it was scary for me. I had no idea what I was doing. And the fact that people would pay me not to know what I was doing, I was amazed by.
Donc il adorait donc travailler dans les années 80 puisqu'il avait l'impression de ne pas savoir ce qu'il faisait. I disagree that you didn't know what you were doing, mais il trouvait que c'était fantastique donc qu'on le paye alors qu'il ne savait pas ce qu'il était en train de faire. Et quand le film Watchmen est arrivé et qu'il a pu revenir sur ces images entre autres, il a eu l'impression donc de revenir au début de sa carrière, de clore le cercle.
So to actually find, 25 years later, I actually went back and did the colouring, which was, I just loved these illustrations. I felt very frustrated I could never colour them originally because they worked perfectly the way they were. But then in 2009, I came back, I knew what I was doing, and I got the opportunity to colour them. Magical.
Et cette fois-ci, là, il savait ce qu'il était en train de faire. Moi, ce que je trouve, what I found impressive is that it looks like it was colored back then. In 1986, because it's totally in the spirit of the original.
Well, that was the thing I came into the whole 2009. I mean, I to have that opportunity to revisit something 25 years later, it's just unbelievable. I found it quite liberating in a way, but the colour theory is still in my brain. But when we had the opportunity, a movie comes out and it becomes a cash cow. The company stands up and takes notice, and a little bit of that money trickles down to the artists and colorists.
Quand un film sort, ça devient littéralement une machine à faire de l'argent, et un peu de cet argent va du côté des artistes, ce qui leur permet de faire. So I think this was.
Promotion.
Je crois que c'était l'image teaser. It was the teaser image for the film, right?
Yeah, and that was just a great fun thing to do. And it was more like the Zender edition, the first time I got the opportunity to do full colour. rendering.
Donc, ce qui est, moi-même, j'avais été surpris. Cette image est le premier poster du film qui est sorti. Et donc, John a pu le colorier. So they asked you to color it. And Dave did. It was some brand new art.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing was they wanted to do things that comics fans would recognize the imagery, and people who had never seen the comic before would be interested as well. So it's that crossover.
Donc les fans de comics immédiatement ont reconnu l'imagerie, et les gens qui ne connaissaient pas voyaient quelque chose d'absolument frappant. Donc ça marchait complètement.
And we started having film posters that were actually doing tasters as well, and they had 6 different ones, and this is one of them with Rorschach.
Donc il y a eu des posters de films derrière. So you work on those posters too?
No, these were done by the studios. I think they would have looked a bit better if me and David worked on them.
Ok, d'accord. Donc non.
And again, it's like we had the opportunity to work on real people who were interpreting our characters, or Dave and Alan's characters. So to actually start to make them look more modern and more realistic was a great opportunity, a fun thing to do.
Donc donc you were trying to get it feel more modern. Donc il essayait de donner un ton plus moderne, donc sur les autres graphismes qui étaient utilisés.
Yeah, so because we were doing it for the movie, so we were actually using the actors. They was like their likenesses were what we were using, and the modernization of the costumes were what we were using as well. So it was a really interesting dynamic.
Donc ils ont pu aussi utiliser le look des acteurs, en fait, pour ce qui donnait un aspect un peu différent et une dynamique différente, mais plus moderne, donc pour ces images.
And you know you've actually hit the big time when you appear on the cover of Mad. This was a fun thing Dave and I did.
Donc une couverture de Mad pour un Comic-Con, oui, it's the time when you know that when you're in Mad, you know you hit the zeitgeist. You know. On sait qu'on a touché à l'ère du temps quand on est dans Mad.
So now I think Watchmen is part of natural culture, you know, it's like the public know it now. It's really, really weird to be involved in such a public phenomenon, and also to be involved in a movie that's is transcending a lot of things. And as I said, the controversy in some ways is like Dave and Alan more in particular, didn't want anything to take away from the story. So every time that DC tried to change and expand the Watchmen universe, he railed against it. He didn't want that to happen.
Oui, Alan Moore ne voulait pas qu'on ajoute, que ce qui se passe après donc la série, donc le film ou autre, il voulait pas que ça enlève quelque chose à l'histoire, donc il essayait de ne pas être impliqué à chaque fois.
And to a certain extent, I really have no problem with it. It wasn't necessarily my baby. I was I was brought in at the tail end of the whole creative process. So Dave and Alan were the ones who were, that is what they conceived. But for me, it seems like an obvious progression for the Watchmen world to cross over with the DC world. And I've just heard today that they are doing a HBO series of Watchmen. And one of the things they were saying about the movie should have been a 12-part HBO series rather than a 2.5-hour movie.
Oui, alors John n'a pas de problème, contrairement à Alan, parce qu'il ne se sent pas aussi propriétaire de l'œuvre originale, puisque c'était vraiment le travail à la base de Alan et Dave. Mais il a aimé donc poursuivre avec les nouveaux comics, donc, qui ont essayé de réintégrer. For me, they tried to get that into the DC universe. I'm not saying I agree that they succeeded. Bon, pour moi, ils n'ont pas réussi, but it was an interesting experiment. Mais c'était intéressant. Et ce qui est intéressant, quand le film est sorti, les gens disaient ça aurait été mieux que ce soit une série de 12 épisodes sur HBO. Et ce qui est drôle, c'est que c'est exactement ce qui va arriver, puisque maintenant on a une série qui est en préparation et dont on a vu les premiers posters déjà.
And one of the things I'm particularly happy about, I just found out today that Trent Reznor is going to be doing the movie for the HBO series, a 9 Inch Nails, so I'm quite happy about that.
Oui, et donc on a appris que Trent Reznor de Nine Inch Nails va faire la musique de la série. Donc John est très content de ça. I think the way what's interesting is that his music it totally evoke a feel, a world. So it's already like this decision is like a third of the succeeding is already there. C'est-à-dire que quand on apprend que Trent Reznor va faire la musique, pour moi, je sais déjà qu'à un tiers, ça va être réussi. Do you agree?
Yes, no, I think, I personally think there's going to be some interesting things coming out of the Watchmen universe, and, however upset Alan Moore's going to get, I think in some ways it's going to expand the audience, and if more people read the original book, then that's got to be good even for Alan Moore.
Oui, pour lui, tout est gagnant, puisque ça va encore étendre l'univers, ça va faire monter encore la connaissance du public autour de la bande dessinée, donc de plus en plus d'intérêt qu'il y a autour des Watchmen, le mieux.
And that's all from me. That's the end of my talk about the Watchmen. Thanks, David, very, very much.
Voilà pour la lecture. C'est la fin de la lecture. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, John.
Thank you.